is a kid who has asymmetric access to resources that no other kid in the world has. He has access to time travel via the time machine, he has access to teleportation via the anywhere port, and he has access to literally photographic memory via the memory pad, and he's still a fuck in the world. Clearly speaking, this is a trend that cannot be allowed to continue, and Doraemon must be strict. Why? There are a few things that you do need to take into account. There is a cultural context behind this. It was 70s to 90s Japan, right? A period of hyper-capitalization during Japan, where everyone was up to, where every competition level was extremely high, which means that survival for a family such as Nobita's, who was not super rich, was very, very difficult to begin with, and upper social mobility is indeed difficult. Considering the fact that we have seen movies such as Senpai Meet Nobita, where we're clearly seeing insinuations that Doraemon might not be beside Nobita forever, it's very, very important that Doraemon were to be strict. 3 structural ways in terms of what this is probably going to be looking like. I think that firstly, there's probably going to be a lot of conditionality attached to how Nobita is going to be attaining goals. That is to say, that if you as Nobita earn certain marks in an exam, or perhaps are able to do well in a sport, you're probably going to be allowed access to a particular group. Note, this probably also means that Doraemon is going to be using a lot of blocks and stuff like that on his, pocket thingy to make sure that Nobita does not try to access this in bad means possible. Number 2, Doraemon is probably going to be doing this well in terms of pushing him actively to be doing stuff and being proactive from the very get-go. Because the way that things work in status quo is that Doraemon is super nagging as a person. Whenever Nobita screws over, only then does Doraemon shout at him and say that, Doraemon, what do you do? Etc. Right? We generally think that that is bad because of the fact that it's hurting Nobita during the time when he's at his lowest and not pushing him actively forward when he can actually take proactive steps. Number 3, it probably looks like Doraemon literally being put in terms of a parental figure position from someone who is perhaps just a peer. What is this probably going to be looking like? Doraemon is probably going to be punishing Nobita for things along the lines of bad behavior and stuff, but it's also going to be actively rewarding him for stuff that is going to be done well. TLDR of this is that Doraemon is probably going to be someone who, based on the virtue of the fact is very good friends with Nobita, is going to be showing compassion to Nobita and is going to be doing this very well. He's basically going to be that one cool uncle who knows how to discipline you well, but is going to be taking you on fun trips and whatnots. Right? That is the TLDR of this case. And no, we do admit that initially there might be some friction regarding this, but some amount of traction might come from Nobita that, hey, I'm not going to be listening to you, etc. But we've clearly seen from episodes where Doraemon has successfully pushed Nobita into starting well and stuff, and whenever things have paid off, Nobita was the first person to go ahead crying and hugging Doraemon. So we clearly think that this friction at best is short-termist to a very, very low extent. The first argument that I'm just going to be running is in terms of why is this something that is inherently a good thing for Nobita and the people involved in the series. The first reason behind this is in terms of why this is the best effective mechanism to deal with the harmful dynamics of overdependence. Because note that in spite of all of these privileges and whatnot, there's an infinite array of future probabilities, but Nobita is still probably going to not end up doing very, very well in life. Because of the fact that he's very lazy, because of the fact that he does not study a lot, which means to say that some degree of strictness is extremely important. We're making sure that Nobita does not go ahead and slack off each and every single time he studies. He does not study, right? Number 2, it allows for things along the lines of marginal improvement. We do agree. Doraemon might not be able to Nobita into someone who is perhaps a Tokyo University dropper or something along the lines of that. But we believe that improvement, even if marginal, is always better. It looks like Nobita, perhaps if he were to be failing exams previously, by the sheer volume of grit and pushing that Doraemon is going to be doing, is going to be making sure that Doraemon, at the very least, pushes Nobita to study for 1 hour a week, or at least 1 hour a day, instead of not studying at all, as we have seen that Nobita constantly and consistently just reads magazines and stuff like that. We do generally believe that it was not shown that Nobita was mentally deficient or something along the lines of within the series, right? Which means to say that the bare minimum competencies that he has will allow him to unlock these particular bare minimum competencies. Number 3, better friends. No, the entire way that friends are made in terms of the series of Doraemon things in and of itself is that Nobita is someone who is extremely exploited because of the fact that Doraemon has access to specific types of tools. Jian and Sunil and other people were literally police of Nobita, and literally the people were quote-unquote friends of him. But the way that this manifests is that there are characters such as Dekisugi, who Nobita is jealous of because of the fact that he likes Shizuka, who apparently likes Dekisugi or something like that. There's a weird triangle going on, right? But the issue with this is that Dekisugi is genuinely a nice guy. He wants to help Nobita out. He wants to help him study out. But Nobita does not allow like this. Doraemon now is explicitly going to be making sure that he, even if he does not like it, is going to be mixing with Dekisugi, is going to be making sure that Chiara and Sunio do not have access to these tools just because of the fact that Sunio is like, you know what, my father is the president of XYZ company, let me show you all of these tools. Like, guys, come on, you're a literal Nepo baby. Why the hell are you proud of being a Nepo baby? I genuinely do not understand. But regardless, whatever, like, probably an army rat thing, right? But in terms of impacts, the first thing that I'm just going to be doing is why is it the case that Nobita is not going to be becoming over-demanding and over-coercive in the long term? It's because of the fact that the inherent nature of him is extremely demanding from Doraemon at each and every single small inconvenience, which makes him incompetent as an adult and incompetent as a child. Hasan.
What is the clear trade-off between being actually strict and being compassionate towards Nobita?
I think that I've made it very clear in my structure that there are those particular situations where you actively make sure that Nobita does not have access to these tools perhaps for even months, Doraemon can even drown him, etc., etc. I do not need to come up with that. Here's a 10,000 layer step model in terms of how this looks like. I can just tell you what a modular range looks like. I think that I've done enough. In terms of why this is going to be done well, the first thing that you need to know is that Doraemon does have the capacity to understand this well because based on future precedents and not historical precedents we're dealing. This is because Doraemon has access to future Nobita and whatnot, and then learn from future mistakes currently based on the virtue of the fact that he's literally adopting the newer means of like being strict. Number two, it's because of the fact that Doraemon, even if he's childish and whatnot, doesn't understand things like nocturnalism. The fact that even if higher grades does not land you the best career, and he's going to make sure that you do not feel very, very bad within school and standings along the lines of that. Based on that, we're very proud to propose coaching.
Okay. So, please from opposition to your okay. Hey, when you take the NSDC, yes,
because government does not care. When does this relationship start? We can actually compare it. So understand, it's very unlikely to be the fact that Doraemon comes up, builds some kind of rapport, builds some kind of understanding with Nobita, and then suddenly decides to pull the gun, and suddenly becomes strict. Because why is that not likely to be the case? So understand that's going to be a very drastic change for him. But also the mentality of Doraemon to be a strict mentor is sometimes he's likely to be embedded with from the future, from the onset, and that is likely to be that his relationship starts on this foot, where Doraemon constantly tries to mentor him, tries to make him understand what his life should look like and what he should do, and why that is explicitly bad. We'll actually tell you what this strict mentorship is, right? Not the enlightened parents, which in enlightened parent stuff, where they talk about how Doraemon will be this kind of uncle who takes young kids but also mentors. Why is that not likely to be the case? Like, for reasons. So firstly, Doraemon comes from this futuristic robot world where robots are ubiquitous, where this kind of technology where does such metrics of success, but the metrics of productivity are something that is likely to be very, very different from the current world Nobita existed as a preteen who does not know what kind of these kind of notions of productivity and these kind of stuff he should stick to. So the idea and rule that Doraemon is likely to enforce on it is likely to be very irrelevant and overly strict because of Doraemon's upbringing in this futuristic world. But also understand, when Doraemon comes into this new world, he came from a future where the mental age of Doraemon itself and the experience that he has with like structural advantages stacked against him. He does not have physical mind or the intellect of some kids of his age who probably simply understand stuff a lot easier and faster to others, right? Meaning that it is easier for Doraemon to constantly see Nobita failing again and again and succeeding at the rules he's enforcing. This makes Nobita feel like a failure, but also feels that Doraemon makes him feel like a failure because he's not being able to do the mentorship work, meaning he's pushed to being even stricter and pushing even arbitrary rules. But also the relationship starts seeming unfair because Doraemon has access to all these gadgets. He probably goes and does whatever he wants because he does not feel the need to be mentored. But Nobita sees that and sees that someone is actively withholding stuff from him. Despite the relationship that never is. Why is this relationship so important? Right? Because understand Nobita's life right now. He lives in a Japanese system where with Asian parents who wants him to succeed, but he simply fails to do so even after we see him trying to do it multiple times, but still failing to live up to the part of Davis, right? His friends also kind of suck. Sunya and Cher are not essentially his friends, but rather competitors in case he kind of like bullies them into being friends with him, right? Daisuke is also someone, he never had that rare friendship. He will always feel inferior to him because Daisuke is the ideal of this person, or this is what everyone expects him to do. So even if they're pushing towards Daisuke, that is not an ideal thing because he never gets that genuine relationship that he only gets from Doraemon, right? Also, Shizuka kind of sucks because she keeps feeling him. So, the idea is that the relationship between Doraemon and Nobita is so very important because his social circle sucks. His like life advantages simply has been dealt a bad about, right? Meaning he needs this right now. But also understand Doraemon isn't actually this. He has successes. Why do we focus on this that way? The relationship between a mentor and mentee is a very taxing one. It is a very one-sided one, which Doraemon does not have the capacity, but also the incentive to actually fulfill, right? He does not get anything in return from it. He wants to feel included. Doraemon wants to feel included in this new world he has come in because he doesn't know shit what's happening here. He doesn't understand why these things are functioning this way because all he sees is a futuristic system where everything makes sense and everything is solved already, right? Meaning Doraemon also wants a companion here, and that is only possible throughout our relationship where it's a two-sided relationship, where they constantly get to have fun. And even like Nobita makes a mistake, Doraemon has his back, and when Doraemon makes mistakes, makes situational errors, makes Nobita fall off his handy, Nobita still has his back, right? And this situation is very, very important because this means there's a parity between these two characters and these two characters are feeling happy. But also lastly on ways, understand why this is important. Period of childhood we are talking about in case of Nobita is something that is very important to understand. Because enabling essentially right now is good. We see even after all these things that Nobita has done in his life, even after being so clumsy and so lazy, he still goes on to become very successful. He has a career, he has a wife he wants, he has kids he wants, right? And he probably essentially has everything he wants, even after making mistakes in his early childhood. Because having the leeway to make these mistakes with someone who has your back essentially makes you a better person because you understand how to get up from this, right? How to actually make yourself better, like how to actually exist in this social scenario. Also, you don't internalize the fact that you are someone at fault, that you are someone who needs to be shamed constantly by everyone around you, and you are someone who needs to be fixed because you don't. You are repeatedly making mistakes or just being lazy, and this scenarios essentially make you who you are even in the future, and we don't deem this as essentially bad. We believe for fixing and this idea of enabling, what is important is the relationship between Nobita and Doraemon, and the satisfaction they both bring to us. Very proud of this.
Communication opening of media. Yes, did you mention BSC and that was
or even if he's a child, we don't understand what child means to an alien. What we do see Doraemon having is an ability to have mature empathy for a complicated child. Understand that Nobita is hard to be around, is someone who is hard to be friends with. But Doraemon finds something in him that requires an intense amount of empathy and a mature understanding of empathy to choose to be friends with this frankly annoying kid. What this means is Doraemon has the ability to understand empathy. He lacks the understanding of human customs and human systems. If that is the case, I think Rubaiyat already tells you what he can do. He can go into the future, he can just see how Nobita's life turns out, see where the failings are, and then talk to people in Nobita's life in the future to figure out where it went wrong. Secondary, he can just gain more information on what human customs are. He can talk to fucking Mr. Rogers and he can just be like, right, this is what kids need to do. This is how child development works. He can read a book, I guess. I just think all of these things tell us that this person can grow into the role of mentor, and I think that fulfills the question. But I think Ovo has some interesting questions. I'm going to address them one day. When does this happen? I think it's after you become friends with this. Because I just don't think any caretaker, or if you ever worked as a teacher, you can impose on a child's life without forming a connection. And I think Doraemon shows that intense amount of empathy to understand that fact intuitively. Moreover, I think Doraemon has genuine compassion for Nobita because Doraemon loves all children. It seems to be that this is an alien who genuinely gets along with children and meets them at their level. Child psychology tells us the best way to understand kids is to go down to their level and understand and see things from where their perspectives are. People like Miss Rachel on YouTube right now talk to children as though she is a children herself, but still guides them. I disagree with this dynamic, like binary dynamic, that if you are nice to children, you can't be strict with them. If that is the case, I think he chooses to be friends with Nobita and then starts setting healthy boundaries with this. What that looks like is, hey Nobita, I know we've been going on journeys, but if you don't pick up your grades, we can't go on that next journey, and I'll be really sad if you don't go on that journey. That is a way where you show compassion, slightly manipulate the kid, and still show that ability to be there for that child while maintaining your boundaries. Even if there is friction, Rubaiyat already tells you that friction will go away the first time he scores like, I don't know, a three-pointer in basketball. The first time he has friends on his phone and he doesn't get bullied. And he sees that the trust and faith that Doraemon puts in actually playing out is the moment that the friction decreases. The second rate, why will Nobita do it? I think it's a good question. Because understand this, right? I don't need to get really deep in this, but like, Nobita genuinely is an abuse. Why? One, he's a deadbeat father. We don't see his father around. We don't know if he's in his life completely. Even if he is, he's an extremely emotionally distant father. But secondary, his mother is someone who is overworked, stressed, and inattentive. And in the moments where she does discipline him, she disciplines him by degrading and berating him. What this tells you is that this kid only responds or sees strictness as a form of abuse. That is why whenever he is called out, whenever he feels shame, he hides. I think the moment where Doraemon sees this, because he lives with this child, the moment where Doraemon sees this, he is likely to say, hey, it's okay to fail. It's okay to not get good grades because I am in your corner, but you need to get your grades up. That is the moment where disadvantaged kids connect with mentors, and I think Doraemon has the capacity to do it. Even if he doesn't, even if he fails and fucks up, right? The first time he tries to do it, he's like, oh, if you don't do it, you're not going to go on that journey. When he sees Nobita crying, is the moment he's going to change his perspective and change his technique. Because again, he's not idiot. If the first time he reads the child crying, you don't want to make that child cry. There are multiple ways to restrict to a child without resorting to violence. I know we all grew up in brown families, but there is another way. If that is the case, why will Doraemon have that perspective of answer? But why does Nobita, what happens, okay, why does Nobita need this, right? I think it's important, not just because Doraemon might not be in his life, but because there's a trend where Nobita's friendships are increasingly becoming transactional. What that means is, Doraemon lets him do just enough to facilitate his imagination and for him to be a kid. But every one of his friendships is based on what Nobita can provide. Every one of Nobita's friends are friends with Nobita because he's a fun friend. If you've ever been in a dynamic where you are the fun friend who has a nice house or who has a certain hobby that everyone wants to collectivize around, you know how limiting that is to that child. That child thinks that people are only friends with him not because people like him, but because they like Doraemon. Because they like the access that Doraemon provides to them. This is an insecurity and self-esteem issue that kids normally grow up with when they have cool elder siblings. And I think that's to be recreated 1,000-fold when Doraemon plays that part of facilitating every friendship and saying, hey, you don't need to have interpersonal skills because I've got a fucking like thing in my pocket. If that is the thing, I think what that does is it limits the exploration of PCAs and the exploration of the hobbies that Nobita could have. All of that essentially means that Nobita is now hamstrung by the care that Doraemon gives him. If this is the case, there's last claim is, but this is bad for Doraemon because Doraemon doesn't want to be a parent. Here's the thing. Doraemon actually is very stressed out by their current dynamic. Why? He's stressed out because it's constantly stressful to bail out a child whenever they put themselves in harm's way. Whenever they put themselves in like situations where you are called in as the primary caregiver. If you've ever had to look after your younger sibling when they massively screwed up, that you know how that feels. You don't want to be a parent when you never signed up for this. All of that tells us that when Doraemon is stricter, he gains access to like when Nobita applies himself and he has better self-esteem, better friendship connections, and a better ability to deal with loss, the adventures that they do go on is more fun for Doraemon. Doraemon now has a better ability to connect with Nobita in a way where you're not connecting with a man-child, but you're connecting with someone who's really there. If all of this is true, the last thing that matters in this debate is, if Doraemon does it extremely poorly, mentor, versus Doraemon doing the coddling extremely well, why is it still worth doing this? The final thing is this. If Doraemon is a bad mentor, he can learn and he can go back and try to do better. He can say, hey, I'm trying my best, I want this for you. We all have friends who want the best in us and see the best in us. And I think that's the moment where Nobita has finally someone who is in his corner. In a world where Nobita just, like Doraemon constantly nags at him, tells him that he's not enough, we think that is a moment where Nobita internalizes something fatal about him. That without external help, he will always be that child reading manga alone in the corner. And I think that is a word we cannot ignore.
We have yellow hair. after being friends for 2 weeks. Why? Because Doraemon, when he came into this world, is very scared. He's now taking a decision. What identity should I pose it before the world to survive in this scary world, scary world? In that moment, he decides I have to be a strict mentor to get to be taken seriously by this new family, which I'm probably going to be leading in the first place. Second, if he changes midway, there is always the possibility or the frightened thought that they will not take me seriously or see me as a hypocrite or the relationship with fracture. This means our fate is more likely that at the initial stage, we take this decision of how he positions me before the world. Second, I think their fate, let's take on their fate, oh, Doraemon is in the stage with Nobita and few friends. I think they took the end goal of Doraemon after being friends for 10 years and then put that framing at the front and use that framing. That is extremely disingenuous at the first place. I think the more likely framing is, let's talk about mentor. What does it mean to be a mentor? As mentor, you expect results. Why? Because you see like you have invested into this person at the first place. So you see his outcomes as your own reflections at the first place, right? But secondly, Doraemon's mental age is also not very much because he was sent to this art probably at a very early stage. Because if he was a very big or adult robot contributing to the economy, he wouldn't have been sent into this world. He was sent at a very new early age at the first place, which means he doesn't have the mental resilience to be an understanding member at the first place. Which all means Nobita is very clumsy. He is physically very clumsy, weak. He has very social anxiety, which means he is more likely to fail. He is very lazy to study, which means he is more likely to get multiple zeros. At that point in time, when Doraemon says, I am interesting, but there are overwhelmingly failures, he starts resenting Nobita at the first place. Because also, when he comes to this art and decides to be a mentor, if Doraemon decides that his purpose in this art is to be a mentor, is to make Nobita better. At that point in time, when Nobita keeps failing, he feels like Doraemon is failing. He feels like his purpose of coming to this art has become a failure at the first place. Which means over time, big grudge and resentment over Nobita starts building up at the first place, right? But also, let's look at other reasons why Doraemon would be a bad actor at the first place. One, as he's doing from the very start, he didn't have the time to adapt to the new culture of this art or of this art to learn how to be a mentor to a teenager at the first place. Secondly, the previous technological difference that Sanjana talks about, which means everyone had a role, which means the cultural dynamics between parent, child, mentor, students are vastly different there. And Doraemon came from there, which means his perception of how to be a mentor stems from that world, not from this world at the first place. But also, this also means Doraemon's mentorship is directly going to be in conflict with his own parent's mentorship at the first place. Which means Nobita always suffers from a cognitive dissonance, which means already confused Nobita gets more confused in this world and all of the harms happen at the first place, right? But also, what is the conclusion? Doraemon is the worst actor to be the strict mentor. Mentor only works when you have gone through the exact same life choices and you know the end outcome, where you are able to guide someone else. I think his parents is a better mentor in this case as opposed to Nobita. Why? Because I think Nobita has already accepted his parents to be a mentor, so this is not a mismatch at the first place. But there is a huge expectation mismatch with Doraemon at the first place. Because when he saw Doraemon adopting into his world, he finally thought, okay, everyone is bullying me. Probably this alien creature is the only one who will understand why I am failing, who will not see my outcomes, rather do mischiefs with me. After that expectation, when you see that Doraemon resort to the exact same mentorship or pushing you to get good outcomes, you start begrudging or become unreceptive towards Doraemon as well. Which means their mentorship becomes unreceptive or non-efficient over time at the first place, right? Because of this expectation mismatch. The last conclusion of this is the rapport or the relationship between Doraemon and Nobita becomes severely detached over the time, which is over the time he doesn't learn to give better mentorship to Nobita, it gets worse over time. That's the conclusion, right? But also, I think let's talk about let's talk about their case. Their case is Zaman is very hustle culture. You need to succeed, you need to learn skills. Why our case beats their case? One, you can still enforce some form of limitation even if you are not a mentor, even if you are a friend, as seen in the real movie. What does this look like? My best friend is Moel. If I say Moel, let's go smoke weed, he reminds me, you are better than this, let's not do this. Which means the form of enabling mischief that happens is going late at night and doing some form of mischief. These are the small form of enabling that happens, not just massive deviation at the first place. Second, I think Japanese culture focuses on hustle culture, sure, which is all of the other institutions teaches you to be responsible. Doraemon doesn't need to be exclusively teaching responsibility at the first place. This looks like Nobita will still be punished when his teacher asks a question and Nobita cannot answer. What Doraemon can uniquely do is make the learning process easier for you at the first place. Because that lesson, self-confidence that Nobita has prevents him from engaging in learning new things. Because he feels like I will fail anyway, so I don't want to learn. What Doraemon does is probably gets out a gadget, brings out an AI 3D video and makes it easier for him to learn so that the next day when his teacher asks him the question, he can answer better. There's a type of enabling that happens which makes Nobita more confident at the first place. But also, when Nobita gets more confident, when he gets that initial head start, he's more likely to access connections, friendship, which helps him learn skills better in outside of in the first place. Enabling him is better because the branch of his failure in their side of health is significantly large. Because without enabling him, he's continuously failing. The frequency of his failure is large. So he feels like I'm continuously letting my parents down, which means he becomes afraid of taking new initiatives to learn skills at the first place. When Doraemon enables him, probably you broke a line, but I'm magically fixing it. The repercussions of the extent of repercussion decreases, which means Nobita doesn't feel like it's the end of the art when I'm failing, which means he becomes okay with failing over time at the first place, which means he gets more confident in taking newer initiatives, which means learning skills is better now than the first place, right? But also, probably gives him a unique sense of identity because he feels like I am the kid who has access to these unique experiences in life which no other kid has. This gives him a unique sense of identity which over the time improves his self-perception at the first place. Let's say, but what is the way? I think success versus happiness. There are a plethora of other institutions which pushes you to success. I don't think the decreasing extent of success is that much. But you see, Doraemon is a unique source of happiness, a unique source of friendship, outside of health because of all of the characterizations and expectations that I talked about. That is severely damaged in their side of health, which means in the way of magnitude of the art, I think we will miss it.
Pulling out the page, number 4.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First some responses, then we'll show some funky extension. No one will be comfortable with it. Now first of all, parent mentorship and competitive distance. Japanese parental mentorship are already enough strict. That means the bar for Doraemon in order to pass is pretty damn low. If Doraemon doesn't be as strict as his parent, that's enough for him to gain some form of appreciation for it. You can add Doraemon's strictness doesn't necessarily lead to his bash every time you fail. Rather, this looks like Doraemon appreciating every little development you do, like scoring 10 score higher in the next math exam, or doing a better thing, or giving charity, donating to a person who was begging in the streets. The 3D AI model learning process to understand the thought better, this exists in our world when we give regulated access to gadgets. In their world, Doraemon gives them a memory portion to remember every single answer of the exam from past forward and get the ace the exam in the first place. It destroys his entire structure in the first thing. What does the status quo look like? If this looks like Nobita crying to Doraemon all the time and getting gadgets all the time and in an unregulated manner. Doraemon in our world looks like Doraemon will actively survey how he is using the gadgets, not making his love with Miyako when Nobita is creating a fucking apocalypse around the world. What does the matrix of the debate look like? It doesn't look like. What does necessitate moral obligation of strictness in the first place? If you have weapons that can drastically affect other individuals, you are obligated to create strict regulation in order to maintain those gadgets and the person who is possessing. Now, how does this moral relation actually correlates this matrix? Secondly, if you create an image which, the absence of it, when Doraemon will not be self-sufficient, when you will be absent of it, your life is significantly worse. This will be another metric. Now, every gadget use that Nobita does has drastic consequence upon the earth and upon the other individuals. Why it is likely to be true and the moral nature of it. Nobita is lazy, that means he chases his easiest escape short routes. That is not considering other people's effect upon him. Secondly, he is highly impulsive by hedonistic desire, that is his love interest, his other desires. These are the major priority for him, not moral consideration. That is, gadget users of Nobita has drastic ripple effect upon the world. What does this look like? This looks like this looks like that average use of time machine means you create ripple effects within the time in unregulated manner. This looks like butterfly effects. When you create small changes like stepping in a butterfly in the past, this creates drastic amount of changes in the future. Second, anywhere door, teleport people to anywhere else. This means this gives you access to violate other people's privacy and step into Shizuka's washroom and walk and live naked. Thirdly, things like liar speaker, which makes Nobita lie anytime that you can turn into reality. This gives them access to distort the version of reality every single people is viewing. He didn't change his idea of lying, he changed the entire world to shift to his liar and therefore created a system where the entire Japan was freaking empty by his action. There is a principal obligation to Doraemon to strictly regulate and strictly survey Nobita in a way so the moral implications are reduced in a way. That means Doraemon's gadget has major moral consequences. What does this far more imply? This acts in more macro and micro scale. When he got invisibility cloak, the first thing he did was kicking into Shizuka's washroom, which violated her privacy. He did it because he was an impulsive pervert and Doraemon didn't change him and rather gave him the gadget use. And any change was retrospective in nature. When he got the ability to, when the urge of future gadget, that means the usage of future gadgets creates large-scale impacts when it is used repetitively and unregulatedly. This is strict monitoring which you are obligated to do as a Doraemon. And this world is much preferred because we are the only team who talks about external harms to other individuals within the society. Now, what happens? Their entire case is contingent of failure. We will, in the longer run, Nobita will be miserably fail in a far greater extent. Why? Because first premise, Doraemon cannot exist forever and not for a strong, extremely long period of time. Why it is likely to be true? Because A, there is a thing called circular paradox of time. Doraemon was created in future and sent to here by Nobita's own lineage. If he stays with him till adulthood, he creates a version of reality where cause and effect exist at the same time, which is metaphysically impossible by the laws of causality because you create multiple ripple effects within the reality. This means by the laws of reality, you cannot exist for a large period of time. Secondly, Doraemon has a future robot, he has future family, like the Doremi, his cousin, his sister, all of those individuals, he needs to meet them. On top of that, he needs to get upgrades, and this is not the place he belongs. He has to live in one way or another. Thirdly, he was sent to here by purpose to solve this as soon as possible. That means it is urgent that he goes back to the family that he sent him in the first place. We also be confused. Doraemon is not permanent, which means when you are overly dependent on someone else's ability to solve yourself, when that person isn't present, you are in a void. Your entire reality crumbles and shatters into pieces. He gets instant shortcuts rather than actual growth, like reading how to deal with academics, how to deal with bullying, how to propose to your crush. These basic things, he does not have any idea of how to cope with the cruel reality that this freaking world is. You don't have a future robot to help you, and none of us, none of the Nobitas in the reality has it. Self-development means a word when he actually gains the courage to confess to his crush, when he can actually stand up to his bullying, to Zian and Sunil. This necessary structure, this necessary strictness, because that's how you slowly and gradually teach him to live how to without me, become less dependent upon me. Creating conditions means you are creating a chain where when he has to use the gadgets less and less. Why in our world, Nobita is far worse off even in the status quo. We believe why even the gadgets, Nobita still couldn't propose to Shizuka. Because deep down, I know I'm nothing without Nobita. Deep down, I know I'm a dependent being. Deep down, I know I'm a fucking crybaby. Not someone Shizuka can actually love, not a dependable figure, but rather a dependent figure for all the time. And nothing without the other robot that has been sent from the future. As he is impulsive, he takes shortcuts to the point that it becomes addictive. But the subconscious within himself tells him that you are inferior compared to Dekisuke and you do not deserve someone like Shizuka in the first place. The courage to propose to your crush, the courage to stand up to bullying, this happens gradually when you gain the confidence through stricter but better forms of validation and smaller marginal changes within your character, which happens in our world. In our world, you create conditional validation forms, like you give them strict necessities. You give them anywhere door to help other people, or go to school when you are extremely sick in order to develop yourself. You create conditional self-development methods, like if you use your gadget, you can study 3 hours. All of it leads to Nobita finally being better, and we should supremely proud to propose. Thank you.
Resuming on it, starting my speech in panel, I have read the manga, but for the sake of this debate, I'm not going to use anything outside of this debate, outside of the exact context in which let's be honest, man. Whoever what happens within the manga or whatever Nobita does by sneaking into the washroom, someone's washroom, that is exactly quoted in the manga, doesn't really affect in this debate. Because, come on, it's a context-based motion. That means that you cannot just assume what happens in the manga will actually happen within the context. There will be proper logical sequence or reasoning to start with. That means that on their side of the world, whatever Nobita does or whatever Nobita does within the manga, whatever OG and CG comes up with, is something that does need a lot of logical reasoning that was significantly missing within opposing government to start with. I'll answer only one question. What is Nobita and what does he actually want? And if he actually gets what he wants, does he change in majority of the cases to start with? And all of the responses will be based on this non-specific answer to start with. What is actually Nobita? Someone who lives in Japan in a situation which has a steady, fastest economy, which is going for economical growth. That means that everyone is running after success, everyone is running after significant amount of growth in majority of the cases. That means that there is an intense competition to start with. But still, even after his peers, bullying from his peers, even after all the jealousies of Nekisuke being some or his other peers being so much better than him, even after his parents scolding him every single day for not studying, even after having the only answer that how he can be a better person or how he can be a successful person, the only answer is by studying. Even after having all the significant resources that he already had within him, and that is just by studying, he doesn't want to study. And come on, now you have entered into the idea of ignorance. Means that you are ignoring what you actually really have. Means that you are ignoring that what you can be. And this is something that is also a part of suicidal behavior to start with. That means that Nobita in itself is someone who already has lost the meaning of his life to start with. That means that he already does not have friends, but also doesn't have trust for anyone, but everyone within his own circle is someone who is pushing him, but he doesn't really have the incentive to work, even after having all the reasons and resources to start with. That means that even if an outer world comes up and tells you to study, it doesn't really change that. You don't really have the specific incentive to start with. That means that even if Nobita comes and tells you that, oh, come on, study, I will give you a lot of things, the significant answer that to this is that you already have those resources in your world to start with as well, but you still don't want to study because you don't really find a reason. You don't really have good friends, and behind this there are several logics. One, because everyone bullies you. Two, no one gives you the proper value. Three, everyone puts a condition for every single behavior that they are doing to. Means that his parents will only do good behavior if he does well. That means that there is already an existing amount of conditions within his life as well. And the time when Doraemon comes up, gives you a lot of good behavior, gives you the soft corner that you always wanted, gives you a significant meaning to his life, to his companionship, and then puts a significant amount of conditions behind it. Because what opening government talks about is something which is very much charitable to their side, that oh, we are going to be very good and then we are going to put the conditions. Even if I really assume this is something that is also existing on the side as well. Because your parents are always telling you that oh, if you are trying to be, if you try to achieve this, I'm always going to be good to you. This means that the time they always try to tell you that oh, I'll give you this gadget, you will go on a very good field, you will always we will go on if you do well. This means that you are putting the same condition that is already facing to start with. That means that after giving him so much soft of a corner, after giving him so much meaning to a life, when you put the same shit that is already going through, this means that you are taking away the significant meaning from his life panel. That means that he now comes into the same circle that is already in to start with. That means that you ruin the soft corner within him, but also this destroys the relationship within themselves as well. What does CG tell you about this very interesting thing? They never see that every gadget, there is a principal obligation to restrict and to use the gadget. Come on, if you already agree with the model of opening government, that means that there will be conditions, and as the conditions are proven, then you can give them any gadget you want. That means that the world is still destroyed on the other side of the world as well. You will still be using dilation as well. You will still be ruining the time frame as well in majority of cases if Nobita wants to. That means that agreeing with opening government's model means that everything that they're really trying to protect is something that already exists on their side of the world as well. This means that on their side, nothing exclusively changes, but also significantly this takes away their Nobita's meaning to his life and really puts it into the same frame that he was actually in. The comparative is in our side, how he actually changes himself. Because now, when you don't put conditions, but also by not putting conditions doesn't mean you are an immoral actor as Doraemon. It means that this is not a part of the manga, but it means that as a robot, you also have certain morals to start with. You have certain things to protect. That means that you cannot allow Nobita to kill someone just because you're not strict enough. That means that as you already have the moral rights or moral thoughts within you as well, you won't be allowing Nobita to do anything that he wants to, because if there's always a reason behind every action, then it means that you can always make him understand that oh, if you kill the Isuki, it's immoral to start with. That means that there's always a check of morality that stops Nobita or stops Doraemon from letting Nobita do everything. But yes, there will be some amount of unfair rights, these gadgets and everything that will always be existing. Okay, but the time you give it to him without any conditions to start with, but also give him the companionship. After all the bullies, you come to him and say that, oh, guess what, I'm always here for you, no conditions, just I'm here. This means that that moment of the time, you always give him that safe corner without any conditions that he's already facing, without any kind of idea or right that you always have to fulfill just to earn something. That means that this soft corner is always existing within him. This gives them this always makes him feel better to start with. And this is what he always wanted, a meaning to his life, a safe corner to his life. When he gets it, now he gets a meaning to his life. The time he gets a meaning to his life, this makes him obviously do something for himself. Because this meaning for our life, when we feel fulfilled, or when we feel the gap of our life, we try to achieve things that are missing in our life. That means that a good study, a good grades to start with. That means that the time Nobita feels fulfilled by having a good companionship, someone who doesn't have conditions behind every single action. That means that he feels that someone is always there for him, and that is the moment of the time he feels fulfilled. That obviously guides him to achieve things in future to start with. That means that there's always a small incentive that is created on our side of the world every single time through this companionship or to this condition-less companionship to start with. This always makes Nobita achieve things that he always that he want to. That means that it always helps him to shape himself in a good way because he is now feeling fulfilled or having a meaning of his life to start with, and that is the reason why our side improved it. That means that it also answers the argument of opening government that the best method of making Nobita successful is giving him conditions to start with, which doesn't make any sense because in majority of the cases you are just making him go under the same loop, which obviously ruins his life. So it's a great problem.
Okay. This government will take
Doraemon and predestination.
So take a beer from Mahmud at the first minute. With that being said, starting my speech. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, start. Ishrak has given you a lot of basic jargons which makes sense. I'll simplify the debate even more so that every single judge actually is convinced. First, let's deal with closing opposition. Closing opposition says that we need items from manga. But understand that whatever we have said happens is whatever we have said will happen is likely to be probable because Nobita is impulsive, Nobita is teenager. These are fundamental things that will exist in both sides of the house, right? That means, and secondarily, Nobita's context is also that means Nobita has very little adherence to structure. As opening opposition has already claimed that he doesn't follow school homeworks, right? That means if these are true, Nobita is eventually likely to go down this path, right? And that's why all of the arguments our arguments are taken from manga is structure and also why Nobita is likely to do these things. Other than that, closing opposition didn't show alternate approach. Second, didn't show why the alternate approach is better. That means Theo doesn't have any cases. What Theo has is, after facing bullying, you can get to Doraemon to get some soft corner. But we believe Nobita's already getting softness from everywhere. His parents are strict now because his parents are relying on Doraemon to be the mentor for them. Look at the episode itself. How many times you have seen Doraemon interact, like Nobita interacting with his parents in a mentorship situation, right? And these are the things that means he's already getting softness from everywhere. I mean, there needs to be an entity who is actually being harsh, actually showing him the right path. That means Theo is out of the way. Now let's engage with opening opposition a little bit. But before engaging in that, let's just sum up the scripture given and what I'll prove in this speech and what is our case summary. In 3 points. Number 1, we believe Nobita at some point coming in terms of independently making choices is very important. That's what we are going to prove. Secondarily, we need to limit Nobita's actions so Nobita's actions doesn't cause drastic consequences to other actors Nobita's friends with. That is also something important which OG missed. OG only talked about why Nobita's development is important. We think in this universe Nobita's affecting other stakeholders as well. Those are also important. But thirdly, most importantly, Doraemon fulfilling their purpose, which is full of main clash. That I'll also prove. Now let's start with opening opposition. First question from opening opposition was Doraemon's mentorship conflicts with the parents one. Ishrak's first Japanese family is already 6. So if Doraemon is marginally less strict than the Japanese parents, that means it's good enough. But the second response is, I believe if you look at that, Nobita's family in particular actually was pretty independent because their word was Doraemon. His parents could let go of parental responsibilities because Doraemon was there. And what this means is, that means their parents actually expect Doraemon to supervise on him. And that's the main reason why they feel like the burden of mentorship has already shifted to Doraemon. That means his parents aren't that strict enough to Doraemon. Only ask Nobita about what is his sport, but nothing other than that. How to deal with life, how to do other things. His parents doesn't give Nobita that consultation. That means Doraemon is actively step up and be the mentoring factor. That's why Doraemon being a strict mentor is exclusively important in this way. Secondarily, in terms of Nobita not being able to handle mentorship well, opening opposition never explained in how, literally how Doraemon, Nobita will actually handle mentorship well in their style. That means this is a problem. What CT does from here is, we think it needs to change. On school level, it's difficult because it's not personalized, it's not well directed. But when Doraemon becomes a strict mentor, it's more personalized. He can change elements which he thinks Nobita is deeply accustomed with, and it's easier to grasp for Nobita. That means Nobita probably wasn't handling mentorship well because it was not directed to him in school. A lot of schools were there. Now he is gradually going through the process. That means he's being able to handle mentorship well. It is extremely important because in his later life, he will join corporate structures, and in that spaces, he will actually need that, right? That means it's also important. But secondarily, the main contention about Doraemon having friend in Nobita, which will also get removed if Doraemon gets strict. This was the major condition for opening opposition. Let's just deal with this. I think Doraemon's fundamental purpose is helping Nobita grow. That's the main reason why he came here to begin with. Right? This process, if we can show this process expedited, that means we fulfill our purpose and Doraemon's goal is served. Doraemon can return back as fast as possible. Understand panel, Doraemon's context is actually pretty important. Doraemon itself is a flawed robot, and that's why he was sent to this planet to begin with. And the main problem is Doraemon is self-aware that he is flawed because Doraemon's ears are not there, and that's why every single second that he stays in the 20th century, despite being a 21st century robot, makes him feel inferior because he could have stayed with his daughter, could have stayed with his sister Doremi in 21st century, but just because he's bad, that's why he's into the 21st century, 20th century helping Nobita. That's why he faces existential crisis in every single second. He actually exists with Nobita. That means the process needs to be expedited for him to go back early. And how this process is expedited? Because he doesn't want to feel he's incompetent anymore. When Doraemon tries to visit Doraemon in 20th century, he feels that incompetence, right? That means he needs to get rid of the self-deprecating existential trait, and that only happens when he sees micro-scale progress. He was not seeing any micro-scale progress in there's the house because all Nobita was doing was causing destruction. Now, the house, Nobita is actively changing small cells by one way or other. That means Doraemon is at least saying micro-scale progress. Doraemon is happy. Doraemon is feeling like I'm changing something. That means it gives more purpose to Doraemon, more happy to Doraemon, and it's also expedites the process. That means Doraemon can go back to where he belongs. If this is not his world, Doraemon needs to go back to where he belongs. Now, moving on to another thing. Let's just compare with opening government a little bit as well. Opening government talks a lot of Nobita's self-esteem and other things going on, but they only deal with Nobita a lot. But other stakeholders are also important because Nobita's being prone to laziness, and Nobita actually using these gadgets actually have further implications on the other stakeholders that he's friends with. Probably Shizuka, Jian, Sunio, or even Dekizuki as well, right? That means we believe if these gadgets usage is not actually maintained or regulated, that means it can cause harms to them as well. But there's another important fact here. Because of Nobita using gadgets, other people feel demoralized because they don't have gadgets. And you are actively being the cause of making them feel like you don't have something that I have. Which also is socially bad for Nobita, by the way. Because Nobita is the only one who has the gadgets. That means Nobita is different. That means it eliminates Nobita as outcast because no one can relate with them that often, right? His usage of gadgets is just often harmful as well to the friends around him. And again, it's closer to that is bad. That means there is an urgency to actually regulate the uses that Nobita has of their gadgets, and that's why it's really important, right? We believe Nobita is actually structurally behind due to the stage in life he finds himself in. I believe Doraemon's gadgets are still necessary. We will not play hardball by saying Doraemon's gadgets aren't necessary, but what we are believing in, Doraemon's gadgets should only be used to create a level playing field rather than making him spoiled, rather than making him giving an advantage over others. His bad studies make a level playing field so that he can compete with everyone if he gets different. So that is Doraemon's ultimate job. Doraemon's ultimate job isn't spoon feeding him all the time, which opening up person believes to be right, because spoon feeding him will only lead to being dependent on Doraemon all the time. But what we do is we make Nobita gradually more independent to him. We actually acknowledge the fact that he's jealous of certain people. We acknowledge the fact that he needs to change his behaviors in certain extent and cannot rely on the gadgets anymore. So these are the actual facts that Nobita needs. And if you cannot, Nobita's parents have given the responsibility to Doraemon because Nobita's parents are caring enough. That's why Doraemon needs to be a strict mentor because every sphere of his life he has given softness. Now he needs some strictness, otherwise he will be completely flawed.
Good to say opposition by behavior.
So time travel.
Because time is
Timing is not.
Alpha.
Alpha time.
No, time is because.
Quick.
Let's start.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Whenever you're ready.
I'll take a pair from CGs. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. 4 responses to CG. Number 1, we didn't respond to the idea of royalty that Doraemon was still have royalty to not give Nobita gadgets. We increasingly that doing one of things like being using the toilet, right? It is important because Ruman didn't respond to this idea of Hasnat in the very first place. Because Doraemon has his own set of morals in the very first place, and that is still standing in his house. Number 2, it talks about how like Nobita will only give Nobita gadgets when he does a good thing, right? It is important because if that is true of government works, that makes Nobita more dependent on gadgets in the very first place. Because whenever Nobita does good in an exam, you want gadget. Whenever Nobita does good, that makes him dependent on a gadget because you would associate fulfillment with the gadget in the very first place. And that majority makes Nobita particularly associated with gadget, and you would think that if I need to fulfill, if I need to get gadget, probably I need gadget in the very first place too. If I get much, I need gadget in the very first place. That is towards the kind of government because now Nobita is associating, is getting more dependent on gadgets because he would got gadgets after every good exam. It is important that even if it happens in government side, it is important because now Nobita is getting less dependent on hours of the world when Nobita like probably even if it is dependent on gadgets in hours of the world because in hours of the world when Nobita sees that even after using Doraemon's gadgets he is not doing well, probably he will start thinking that I need to do well on my studies. That is important because like it is probably happen that even after like using Doraemon's gadgets, Nobita will still not do well in hours of the world. It is important because now in hours of the world the particular dependency on gadgets decreases. Number 3, probably they talk about the parents will not be strict. Ruman may talk about it. It is particularly untrue because if your parents say that Nobita did worse for your exam, parents will blame you more because even after like having the instructions for Doraemon, you didn't do well in an exam. They will blame you much more in Nobita more that you are such a shit piece of child. That generally that in their side of the world, the blame game much more happens to Nobita because even after getting instructions from Doraemon, Nobita is still getting worse. It is not that in our side of the world because probably like Doraemon is not a strict instructor, right? Doraemon is a close friend. So your parents do not see Doraemon as a particular link up, a particular catalyst to having a good result, having a good thing in our side of the world. Number 4, like if they talk about the external harm to happen to other people, and probably there are other people who are not having Doraemon, right? But Doraemon exists on yours and also. Doraemon will still give gadgets to yours and also, right? The Doraemon still exists in government sides. That generally means that CG's whole ideas of like doing external harms to individuals or other people still do not get created in their side of the world. Number 2, who talks about like Doraemon with their close friend, but they characterize why do Nobita needs this type of close friend in the very first place. We believe that unconditional love is the only thing, or unconditional friendship is the only thing Nobita needs at all, even if like fails in his exam in the worst scenario of ours, right? Why? Because probably their own mechanism of competition, their own mechanism of how like competition exists, probably your own mechanism of how this probably thing might fail. Because like talks about that, you will probably badminton, Nobita will awkward. Hasan also talks about it. If this is a particular thing that only differentiating factor for Nobita is to have a close friend and to feel good about it because when he grows up or he does a job, you will remember this childhood to a larger extent. Even if he do bad in his exams, the particular good friendship and good friend having better memories, doing good things with his particular friend because probably Doraemon will spend a good time with him. It is important for Nobita to remember in the later stages of his life because when he sees through a childhood that I have such a good friend and unconditional love, he will love me no matter what. He didn't particularly like be a teacher to me. It is important in our world for the Nobita to eventually have unconditional love in our world. That's important because Nobita needs these type of things to eventually have a memorable childhood to the very first place. Why is it particularly true in our world we achieve this to a larger extent? Because when Doraemon suddenly comes to a particular life of Nobita, with this particular 10 years old, and he suddenly sees an alien creature, right? And sees even if he's a good mentor, like according to the particular characterization of OG, he will still act like a mentor, right? That he will tell Nobita that, I have come here to particularly like mentor you. I have come here to particularly increase your grades. That generally means that Nobita going to still act as a mentor. There's the word. Probably afterwards he will act as a friend. That he will tell you, I'm a friend to you. I'm particularly coming here to like spend good time to you, increase your lifestyle, probably better your lifestyle, probably like being a good friend, right? It's important also the word because now Nobita sees this sudden alien creature as a particular actor who is good, who is a good friend of him. It is important for Nobita to have because in also the word when he sees this particular actor as a good friend, he remembers him to a larger extent after this 10 years after Doraemon goes out, right? Because when Nobita goes out and like suddenly this like Nobita in that like goes out and sees his child back, he does not see Doraemon as a strict mentor in hours of the world. He sees Doraemon as a particular friend who kept the companionship even in the worst case scenario, who went out to various adventures, right? Because when you are like particularly like stricting Doraemon to like just do well, then we'll give you gadgets. Probably Doraemon and Nobita won't have like various adventures, go to like do different types of things, make different types of memories, right? This type of things will not be done in the rest of the world because Doraemon will probably you need to do good grades before do anything better in our world. It is important because Nobita will not have a particular feeling for the unconditional love from Doraemon in the rest of the world. It is important for Nobita to have because no one has ever done that to them before that. Yes.
Look, I have a friend who always takes care of me, who does everything I want, who's emotionally fully fulfilling. Is that an equal friendship? And when I grow up, do I feel fulfilled by that, or do I feel that as a codependent?
It's dependent on how your friends are. Probably they do not have enough friends. They do not have probably good friends, right? He needs one particular friend to feel good about it. And now Nobita, when Doraemon comes and be a good friend, probably he feels that he is a very special person. He does not feel very good because like does not feel because do not have enough special friends, right? Any particular if he has a friend who does consider him as a special friend, guess at the very first place. It is only dependent on Nobita's case because Nobita do not have enough special friends. But lastly, on the major way, their talk is let's assume they went on the clash of like going on makes Nobita a very good student, very better person, right? Even that is true. It is particularly arbitrary because like Doraemon, like both sides talk, but Doraemon has a lot of options as a mentor to teach to Nobita, right? Only talks about that Doraemon will go to future and eventually have let's see how this is a good way to mentor. They talk about the way. This is a particularly there is a lot of Doraemon is a bad mentor, right? There is a lot of options for Doraemon to actually mentor Nobita. That generally means that the particular option that Doraemon will choose is pretty arbitrary and pretty way to mentor Nobita in the very first place. That is particularly important because if you are going on a different treadmill, but there is a lot of good students in Japan, you need to choose a particular like bar of entry that is very low. It is the low bar of entry is particularly present in hours of the world when you just close friend chill out with Nobita, probably like advises him to go to your exam. That is important for hours of the world. We believe that in hours of the world when you have a close friend it is very much good as
This will be a silent round and we'll be giving results online. Just online training.